Your colleague just got a 15% raise. You watch her celebrate, post about it, feel that mix of happiness and envy. 15% sounds significant until you do the math. On $70,000, that's $10,500 more per year. Before taxes, it's about $6,300 in her pocket, enough to upgrade her car payment and maybe take one extra vacation. But what she doesn't realize, what nobody tells you, is that this moment, this achievement she worked 3 years for, just locked her into another 3 years of the exact same game. This is the geometry problem nobody's teaching you. Let me show you something that'll make your stomach drop. Take someone earning $50,000. They're ambitious, hardworking, everything you're supposed to be. They get promoted every 3 years, like clockwork. 7% raise each time. Solid, right? By year 30, they're making $380,000. Sounds impressive until you realize someone who started a business, failed twice, then figured it out, made that in month 4 of year 5. The difference isn't effort or intelligence, it's geometry, linear growth versus exponential growth. Your salary moves in a straight line. Even with percentage increases, you're adding. The universe of wealth operates on multiplication. And here's the cruelest part. The system is designed to make addition feel like winning. Your company gives you 5% this year. Inflation is 4.2%. You netted 0.8% in purchasing power. But it feels like progress because the number went up. You're watching the scoreboard while someone changed the value of the points. This isn't an accident. This is how the trap maintains itself. Give people just enough nominal increase to feel like they're advancing while their actual position stays exactly where it needs to be. Dependent. I want you to think about your last promotion. How long did you work for it? What did you sacrifice? Now think about what it actually bought you, not in terms of monthly payment increases, but in terms of freedom. How much closer to financial independence did it move you? For most people, the honest answer is it moved them backward. Because that promotion came with new expectations, longer hours, more stress, and lifestyle inflation that consumed the entire increase, plus some. Here's what's actually happening. The corporate ladder isn't a ladder at all. It's a treadmill with pictures of higher floors taped to the wall in front of you. You're moving, sweating, working harder, but the distance to actual wealth stays constant. Meanwhile, someone else figured out they could take the elevator. The math is simple but brutal. Let's say you make $80,000 and you're exceptional at your job. You get promoted every 2 years with a 10% raise each time. That's better than average. After 20 years, you're making $480,000. Impressive on paper. But someone who took $80,000, lived on $40,000, and invested $40,000 per year in index funds at historical returns is now sitting on $1.6 million in assets. They didn't get a single promotion. They just understood geometry. But wait, you're thinking, I can't live on half my income. And that's exactly the thought that keeps you trapped, because you built a life that requires 100% of your income. You didn't choose to. The system nudged you there. Every financial decision you made seemed reasonable at the time. The apartment upgrade, the car that's reliable, the neighborhood with good schools. Each decision was logical. Together, they formed a cage. The real issue isn't the individual choices, it's that you're operating in a system designed to convert time into money at a fixed exchange rate. And that rate is set by someone else, your boss, your industry, your geography. You can negotiate, you can perform, you can climb, but you're still operating within a framework where your upside is capped. There's a maximum number of hours you can work. There's a maximum rate the market will pay for your labor. Those two numbers multiplied together represent your ceiling. Now contrast that with equity. With ownership, those operate on different mathematics entirely. When you own a piece of something, your upside isn't capped by your hours. It's capped by the value of what you own. And value can grow geometrically. A company can 10 times, a property can triple, an investment can compound. Your salary cannot 10x unless you change jobs, industries, or realities. This is why the wealthy obsess over equity and the employed obsess over salary. They're playing different games with different mathematics. One game has a ceiling, the other doesn't. And the cruelest part, the salary game actively prevents you from playing the equity game because it consumes all your time and capital. Think about your current job. What percentage of your compensation is salary versus equity? For most people, it's 100% salary, 0% equity. You're being paid exclusively in the currency that cannot compound. Even if your company offers stock options, they're typically a tiny fraction of your package, enough to make you feel included, not enough to change your life. Let me introduce you to two people who started at the same company on the same day. Marcus took the product management track. Steady promotions, great reviews. 10 years later, he's making $200,000. Everyone thinks he's successful. Jessica took a lateral move to a startup for less money, but with real equity, 3% of the company. The startup struggled for years. She made less than Marcus. Then it got acquired. Her 3% became $4.2 million. One transaction erased 10 years of Marcus's incremental raises. You might say Jessica got lucky, but here's what's interesting. She made that choice 5 times. 3 startups failed completely. One gave her a modest return. One changed her life. Marcus made his choice once and stuck with it for a decade. Who was really betting on themselves? The traditional career path trains you to avoid variance. Get the sure thing. Take the steady paycheck. Don't risk it. But in a world where linear growth can't compete with geometric growth, avoiding variance means avoiding wealth. You're choosing safety over abundance. And that choice gets reinforced every 2 weeks when that predictable deposit hits your account. Your nervous system learns that salary equals security. It becomes harder to walk away, harder to take risks, harder to imagine a different structure. You've trained yourself to need that regular payment, and once you need it, you've lost your negotiating power, not just with your employer, but with reality itself. The person collecting a salary and the person building equity are experiencing time differently. For the salary earner, time is the enemy. You only have so many productive years. You're racing against retirement. For the equity builder, time is the advantage. Every year, your assets compound. You're racing toward the point where your assets generate more than your labor ever could. This is the shift nobody talks about. At some point, you have to stop trading time for money and start trading money for time. But if 100% of your energy goes into the time for money exchange, when exactly do you make that transition? The system doesn't build in an exit. You have to create it yourself. And that's exactly what we need to examine next. The math is simple, but most people never run it. Let me show you what I mean. Take that $200,000 salary. Sounds impressive, right? Now project it forward. If you get a generous 5% raise every single year for the next decade, you'll be making $325,000. That's the optimistic scenario. Reality is usually worse. Most raises are 2 to 3%, barely matching inflation. You're running in place on an accelerating treadmill. Meanwhile, inflation is doing something most people fundamentally misunderstand. It's not just making things more expensive. It's actively devaluing your future raises before you even get them, that 5% raise. Inflation just ate 3% of it. Your real increase is 2%. Over 10 years, you've barely moved. But here's where it gets mathematically brutal. Your expenses aren't inflating at the average rate. Housing, healthcare, education, these inflate faster than the official numbers. Much faster. So while your salary inches up by 2 to 5%, your actual cost of living is climbing by 7 to 10% in the categories that matter most. You're not treading water, you're slowly sinking. And the corporate ladder you're climbing is attached to a sinking ship. Now contrast that with equity, not the feel-good stock options that vest over 4 years. Real equity. Ownership in something that can grow exponentially. A business, real estate, assets that don't care how many hours you work this week. I know someone who bought a small apartment building in 2015 for $600,000. Put down $120,000, rented out the units. 5 years later, the building was worth $1.1 million. She refinanced, pulled out $300,000 in equity, bought another building. Never sold the first one. It's still generating cash flow. Her initial $120,000 is now controlling over $2 million in assets. Her salary during those same 5 years. She was making $70,000 as a teacher, got a 3% raise each year, ended at about $81,000, but her net worth increased by over $1 million. The salary wasn't the wealth generator. It was just the fuel to acquire the assets that actually built wealth. This is the pattern the salary trap hides from you. It keeps you focused on the wrong scoreboard. You're watching your annual income tick up slowly while completely ignoring the fact that you own nothing that compounds. The system encourages this blindness. Every corporate culture celebrates promotions and raises. Nobody celebrates the employee who kept their expenses flat and funneled the difference into income-generating assets. That person isn't playing the game everyone else is playing. They're quiet. They drive the same car for 10 years. They don't upgrade their apartment every time they get a raise. And 15 years later, they retire at 45, while everyone else is still grinding towards 65, wondering what happened. What happened is they understood the assignment. The goal isn't to maximize salary, it's to maximize the gap between income and expenses, then weaponize that gap. Let's talk about what that actually looks like, because this isn't theoretical, it's mechanical. You need a system, not motivation. First, you have to break the automatic lifestyle inflation cycle. This is harder than it sounds because it's socially reinforced. Your peers get promoted, they move to a better neighborhood. You get promoted, you feel pressure to do the same. Staying in your smaller apartment feels like losing. But that pressure is the trap talking. Every time you inflate your lifestyle, you're locking in a higher baseline of required income. You're making it harder to take risks, harder to invest, harder to leave. You're choosing the appearance of success over the reality of wealth building. The alternative is uncomfortable. It means living below your visible means. It means driving a car that's paid off when you could afford payments. It means saying no to dinners and trips that everyone else seems to afford effortlessly. They're not affording them. They're financing them. There's a difference. Second, you have to redirect that gap with religious consistency. Not when it's convenient, not when there's money left over, automatically. The day your paycheck hits, the gap moves into assets. If you wait until the end of the month to invest what's left over, there will never be anything left over. Expenses expand to fill available cash. It's a law. This is where most people fail. They understand the concept intellectually, but never operationalize it. They think about investing. They plan to start soon. Meanwhile, years pass. The gap that could have been building wealth gets absorbed by slightly better restaurants and marginally nicer things. You have to treat your investment account like a bill that can't be skipped. Rent gets paid, investments get funded, everything else is optional. Once you flip that mental model, everything changes. Third, and this is the part that separates people who get wealthy from people who just save money, you have to put that capital into assets that have asymmetric upside, not a savings account earning 0.5%, not even index funds that'll give you 8% annually if you're lucky. You need things that can 10 times. Small business ownership, real estate in emerging areas, skills that let you freelance at 5 times your hourly rate, equity in startups if you know how to evaluate them. These carry risk. Yes, but the salary path carries a different kind of risk, the certainty of mediocrity. Most people never take this step because it requires confronting uncertainty. The salary feels safe because it's predictable, but predictability isn't safety. It's just slow motion limitation. Here's the question nobody wants to answer honestly. If you keep doing exactly what you're doing now, where will you be in 10 years? Not where you hope to be. Where does the math actually take you? Run your current salary forward with realistic raises. Factor in inflation. Look at your expense trajectory. Does that math end with freedom, or just a nicer version of the same trap? For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. The trajectory doesn't lead to wealth. It leads to a slightly better salary that still disappears every month into obligations that grew alongside it. Breaking out requires accepting that the game you're playing can't be won by playing it better. You have to change games entirely. Stop optimizing for salary growth and start optimizing for equity accumulation. Stop measuring success by job title and start measuring it by assets owned. This shift doesn't happen accidentally. It happens when you consciously decide that comfort isn't worth trading your next 20 years for, when you realize that the real risk isn't trying something different. It's spending decades climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong building. The corporate ladder has a ceiling that nobody mentions in the job interview. You can climb it for 30 years and still end up one bad quarter away from a severance package and a LinkedIn post about new beginnings. That's not pessimism, that's math wearing a name tag. Let's be specific about what salary growth actually looks like. You start at 60,000. You're great at your job, so you get promoted. Now you're at 70. 3 years later, another promotion. 85. You're in your 30s now, doing well. By 40, if you're exceptional, maybe you're at 120. That's nearly double where you started. Sounds impressive until you realize you spent 15 years getting there and your rent tripled in the same window. The finish line moved faster than you did. Meanwhile, someone who bought a duplex at 25 and rented out half of it now owns the building outright. They didn't work harder. They captured value differently. One of you traded time for incremental percentage increases. The other bought an asset that appreciated and paid for itself simultaneously. Same 15 years, completely different outcomes. The system needs you to believe that working your way up is the path. It needs you focused on the next performance review, the next title bump, the next cost of living adjustment that never quite matches actual cost of living. Because while you're focused on climbing, you're not building anything that exists outside your employment contract. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Salary is rented income. The moment you stop working, it stops coming. Equity is owned income. It exists whether you show up or not. Every hour you spend earning salary without converting some of it into equity is an hour you'll eventually have to repeat. You're not building forward momentum, you're refilling the same tank over and over. People get stuck because they confuse activity with progress. Busy feels productive. A full calendar feels important. But activity without asset accumulation is just expensive motion. You're burning energy to stay in place like running on a treadmill and wondering why the scenery never changes. Switching games means accepting that your most valuable working years can't be spent entirely on salary acquisition. They have to be spent building systems that outlive your employment. That might mean starting a side business that generates $2,000 a month. Doesn't sound like much compared to your salary, but that $2,000 doesn't require you to be anywhere. It's not capped by your hourly rate or your boss's budget. It can scale in ways your job title never will. Or it means buying assets that throw off cash flow, a rental property that nets $800 monthly, a portfolio of dividend stocks that pays quarterly. Small ownership stakes in businesses run by people better at operations than you. These aren't get-rich-quick schemes, they're get-rich inevitable strategies. They work slowly, then suddenly. The psychological block is always the same. It feels safer to keep collecting the salary than to redirect some of it into something uncertain. Your paycheck is guaranteed, assuming your company stays solvent and your position stays funded and the economy stays stable and your industry doesn't get disrupted. When you list the assumptions out loud, the guarantee starts looking conditional. Equity feels risky because the outcome isn't predictable, but the salary path has a completely predictable outcome, and for most people, it's not freedom. It's reaching 55 with a decent retirement account and a nagging feeling that you traded the best years of your energy for permission to stop working when you're too old to enjoy it fully. The people who break out aren't smarter. They just have a different relationship with uncertainty. They'd rather take a controlled risk with asymmetric upside than accept the certainty of a capped outcome. They see their salary job as a funding mechanism for their real wealth strategy, not the strategy itself. This requires a specific kind of discipline that feels unnatural at first. You're making $80,000, but you're living like you make $55. The gap doesn't go to nicer things. It goes to buying time. Every dollar you put into assets is buying back an hour of your future that you won't have to sell. Most people never frame it that way. They see investing as delaying gratification. It's not. It's purchasing freedom in bulk at a discount. You'll need to. Ignore what everyone around you is doing. They're upgrading apartments and leasing cars and booking trips they'll be paying off for months. You're going to look like you're falling behind by every visible metric. Let them think that. Wealth is invisible right up until it's undeniable. The gap between appearing successful and being financially independent is enormous, and most people spend their lives on the wrong side of it. At some point, the math flips. Your assets start generating more monthly than your expenses require. That's the threshold. Not retirement, not some distant future state. The moment your equity income exceeds your lifestyle cost, you're no longer trapped. You might keep the salary job because you like it or because it accelerates your asset acquisition. But you don't need it. And that changes the entire power dynamic. Your boss can't threaten you with something you don't need. The company can't extract extra hours by dangling a raise you're not dependent on. You can take risks because failure doesn't mean catastrophe. It just means recalculating. This optionality is what the salary trap systematically denies you. It keeps you just comfortable enough and just obligated enough that leaving feels impossible. Breaking free isn't about hating your job or rejecting corporate work. It's about refusing to let your income source be your only income source. It's recognizing that trading 40 hours a week for a paycheck is fine as long as you're simultaneously building systems that don't require your hours. The trap isn't employment. It's the belief that employment alone will ever be enough, that working harder at your job will somehow result in wealth rather than just a better job. The math doesn't support it, never has. The people who got wealthy through salary alone are statistical anomalies, and even they usually converted that salary into assets that compounded independently. You're not going to accidentally stumble into financial independence by being really good at your job. You're going to build it intentionally by treating every paycheck as capital allocation, not spending money. By asking where each dollar goes to work, not what it buys. By measuring wealth in assets owned, not income earned. The salary trap is sophisticated, but it's not inevitable. It only works if you accept the premise that your labor is your only valuable resource. The moment you reject that and start building equity, the trap loses its grip. You're not stuck. You're just playing a game you were taught to play. You can learn a different one whenever you decide the current game's prizes aren't worth the cost of playing. You already know what you need to do. The information isn't the missing piece. The missing piece is the decision to stop waiting for permission. Nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's time to start building equity. Your company certainly won't. They benefit from you staying exactly where you are, focused on the next raise, the next title, the next incremental upgrade that keeps you running. The mathematics are clear. Linear growth loses to exponential growth every single time. Salary caps out, equity doesn't. Hours are finite. Assets compound infinitely. You can spend the next decade optimizing your position on the corporate ladder, or you can spend it building something that makes the ladder irrelevant. Both require work. Only one leads somewhere different. Most people reading this will nod, agree, and then do nothing. They'll go back to optimizing their resume, prepping for the next review cycle, hoping this year's raise is bigger than last year's. The trap will tighten so gradually they won't notice until they're 50 and suddenly aware they own nothing that generates income without their presence. You don't have to be most people. You just have to be willing to live like most people won't so you can eventually live like most people can't. That starts today. Not when conditions are perfect or when you've saved enough or when the timing feels right. The timing will never feel right. The conditions will never be perfect. You start with what you have, where you are, and you redirect the gap. 10 years from now, you'll either own assets that changed your life or you'll have a slightly better job title and the same financial anxiety. The difference is what you do in the next 90 days, not what you think about doing, what you actually do.